Welcome to Anime Saga. Let's jump straight into the recap. The girl never in class, she would develop special feelings for him. Saito, a high school senior who just turned 18, had always been ranked first in school. The girl standing before him, Akane, was the second-ranked student and his most troublesome rival. She often picked fights with him over trivial matters, like complaining that he didn't clean the blackboard properly. Saito found her constant nitpicking incredibly annoying. That evening, Saito received a call from his grandfather, summoning him for an important discussion. Although reluctant, he had no choice but to go. Soon, he was surrounded by his grandfather's subordinates. His grandfather, Saito Tenryu, was a powerful figure who had transformed the family business into a world-class IT company with her grandmother, but she unexpectedly ran into Saito again. Naturally, their argument resumed. Just then, seeing the two quarrel, Saito immediately questioned why they had been called here. His grandfather then explained the reason. His time couldn't be reversed. They wanted Saito and Akane to fulfill their unfinished love story by getting married. Both immediately refused. However, the grandparents were prepared for rejection. With a clap of his hands, Saito's grandfather had a stray dog brought in and declared, "If you don't agree to marry, I will make this dog the heir of the Saito group. The entire family's future will be in jeopardy." Though the demand was absurd, Saito knew his grandfather never joked. He began to waver. The grandparents then made a dramatic exit, leaving the two behind, both feeling as though they were being blackmailed. Saito wanted to know what Akane's grandmother had said, but she hesitated over whether to agree to the marriage, so she called her best friend, Himari, for advice. Himari asked if she had someone she liked. Akane's standard answer was, "I don't have anyone I like, but there is someone I absolutely despise." Himari suggested, "Since you don't like anyone, does it really matter if you marry?" Akane gave their answer to their grandparents. To everyone's surprise, they both agreed to the marriage. Saito's grandfather didn't want to delay matters. "You're getting married now. I've already prepared a house for you." He immediately took them to a newly built villa. "You know how I operate. Don't even think about running away." Saito knew his grandfather was too domineering to argue with, but he had to admit the house was well furnished. As they explored the place, Akane suddenly noticed something shocking. There was only one bed. Their grandfather smirked. "That was intentional. You two are married now, of course you should sleep together." Saito immediately started checking for surveillance cameras. Meanwhile, Akane, realizing that she would be alone in a house with Saito, began to panic. "You're definitely planning to force yourself on me." So they began unpacking their belongings. Saito tried to help Akane out of kindness, but she kept avoiding him, afraid that he would take advantage of the situation. Saito dismissed her concerns, telling her not to flatter herself. He had no such thoughts about her. When bedtime arrived, they had to face the most critical part, sharing the same bed. Even though Saito had no romantic interest in Akane, sleeping next to a beautiful girl was still a challenge for his self-control. After calming down, they established 3 ground rules. First, their marriage. This suited Saito perfectly. It helped them conceal their marriage from everyone. But he almost forgot about his sharp-nosed younger sister. "Brother, your son is..." When Akane got into yet another. Akane was speechless. How could anyone be healthy eating just this? Then Saito went out and stocked the fridge with instant noodles, believing they were the ultimate combination of a... However, her cooking process looked so intense that Saito began to suspect she was poisoned. Saito snatched the food, got into another argument over bathroom trash. Akane was horrified to learn that Saito only cleaned up once a month. Saito retorted, "We're only living together." Started questioning everything. "Our values are completely different. Is this marriage even worth maintaining?" Saito found himself unable to look away. But as a gentleman, he quickly turned to leave. However, something felt off. He rushed back in and pulled Akane out of the water, only to slip and fall, landing directly underneath her. That exact moment, Akane woke up. Saito was immediately kicked out of the bathroom. He didn't bother explaining that he had actually saved her from drowning. Meanwhile, Akane was mortified. Did he see everything? However, knowing Saito's character, she started to wonder, was I really? Saito coldly brushed her off. The next day, still feeling dejected, Akane turned to Himari for advice. Himari told her, if you want to get along with someone, it's not about making them respect you, it's about learning to respect them first. On the other side, Saito's sister noticed his troubled expression and decided to help him out. If you really can't stand that girl, why not just divorce her, she suggested. But her words struck a chord with Saito. That evening, when he got home, Akane suddenly grabbed his hand. She also had something to discuss. They began negotiating strategies for coexisting in the house. First issue was household chores. Saito, following his efficiency theory, preferred to let dishes and laundry pile up before dealing with them. This infuriated Akane. But then, Saito remembered his sister's advice and, in a rare moment, compromised. He agreed to wash the dishes and do laundry daily. This small concession softened Akane's attitude toward him. After a long discussion, they established ground rules for their future life together. Finally, Akane made one more request. She hoped Saito would praise her cooking. That night, before bed, Akane called Himari to thank her cooking a feast. During the meal, Saito noticed her expectant gaze, so he made sure to compliment her food as promised. To his surprise, Akane's smile made his heart skip a beat. But just as things were improving, an unexpected problem arose, willing to back down, so they settled on a mutual compromise. Through this process, they realized that the other person wasn't as unbearable as they had initially thought. Their relationship became noticeably less tense. Akane even invited Saito to watch a movie together. Turned out to be a cat documentary. Seeing his reluctance, Akane suggested, "Then I'll do something you enjoy instead." Saito preferred gaming over movies. Saito found it oddly amusing. That night, they shared a bed as usual. When Saito woke up in the middle of the night, he gently pulled the blanket over Akane. Coincidentally, she woke up at that moment and thanked him. Saito smiled and admitted, "I actually had fun with you today." After that, their usual school arguments disappeared. Even when Saito helped Akane with something trivial like cutting an eraser, she didn't immediately start scolding him. Himari, witnessing their unusual harmony, was dumbfounded. "Did you two make up or something?" She was shocked to see her brother reading a book on improving communication skills. Saito had learned from the book that shared activities could strengthen bonds, so he decided to test it out. He invited Akane to go grocery shopping together. Akane, misunderstanding the situation, blushed furiously. "Hey, are you asking me out on a date?" Saito quickly clarified, "No, we're just buying ingredients together. Carrying everything alone is a hassle." As luck would have it, Himari, who usually worked after school, was free and wanted to go home with Akane. Although Himari was extinct and matched the best bargains, Saito was impressed and even joined in on the discount battle. For the first time, he saw Akane in a new light. "I never knew you were so practical," he admitted. "You'll make a great wife someday." That night, Akane woke up and found Saito staring at her. She was startled. Is this it? Has his inner beast finally awakened? Saito, realizing he'd been caught, confessed. Explaining, Akane turned to him and exclaimed, "Why did you come out here without a shirt?" It seemed that after what happened the previous night, both of them had become exams. After some time, Saito specially prepared a late-night snack for Akane. She couldn't help but wonder, why is this guy suddenly being so snack? Due to her lack of sleep, Akane eventually collapsed in the school hallway. Himari rushed over to check on her, urging her to rest more. "I must beat Saito." That night, as usual, Saito brought her a late-night snack, but when he got closer, he noticed Akane's face was flushed. Testing her forehead with his hand, he realized she had a fever. Without hesitation, he carried her to bed to rest. Even while sick, Akane mumbled about wanting to continue studying. Saito soon learned the real reason she was pushing herself so hard. It wasn't just about beating him. Her dream was to become a doctor. However, her family couldn't afford medical school. Her grandmother had promised that if she married Saito, all her tuition fees would be covered. After he considered calling an ambulance, but Akane weakly said that no taxis were available. With no other choice, he carried Akane to the hospital himself. During the journey, Akane, despite her fever, was surprised by his strength. For the first time, Saito heard Akane talk about her dream. He was deeply moved and admired her determination, and their relationship improved significantly. When the exams ended, Saito once again scored a perfect 100. Himari, full of admiration, suddenly leaned in close, so prevented her from expressing her true feelings. Saito's younger sister, however, saw through everything. Every morning, Akane started preparing Saito's bento. When he opened it at school one day, his sister suddenly appeared beside him. "I remember you already ate breakfast," Saito remarked. "But this is different," she insisted. "I want to know what an itsuma bento tastes like." The moment Saito heard those words, he instinctively clapped his hand over her mouth. Just then, Himari noticed something strange. Saito's bento looked exactly the same as Akane's. Their classmates also caught on and gathered around. Akane immediately denied any connection between them, but the suspicion remained. Before they could compare their bentos, Saito's sister devoured his entire meal in one go. During break time, Himari cornered Saito to confirm her suspicions. Saito, keeping his cool, made up a random excuse. "It was just a coincidence, we happened to use the same frozen food." Hearing Saito personally deny any romantic involvement with Akane, Himari felt relieved. That night, as usual, the two of them shared a bed. Suddenly, a strange noise startled Akane awake. She thought she saw a shadow moving in the room and was terrified. Saito woke up to her scream but saw nothing unusual. However, Akane was so frightened that she couldn't go back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Akane burst into Saito's study, trembling. "I heard footsteps running around in the living room," she whispered. But Saito remained skeptical. "Then why don't you record it with your phone as proof?" From that point on, Akane clung to Saito wherever he went, even to the bathroom. She even insisted he accompany her when she took a bath. Saito, struggling to maintain his sanity, resorted to deep philosophical thinking just to stay composed. At school the next day, Saito's sister immediately noticed his troubled expression. "You're worried about your wife, aren't you?" she teased. Saito sighed. "She keeps saying there's a ghost in the house and won't leave me alone." His sister's playful demeanor suddenly turned serious. "What if there really is a ghost? Let me come over and investigate." And so, Shizui began examining their house for supernatural activity. "The energy in your room is bad," she declared ominously. "If you don't exorcise the spirits soon, things will only get worse." That evening, she followed them back to their marital home. As she examined Sato's study, she unexpectedly found his pants. Without thinking, she picked them up and sniffed them. Saito noticed something was wrong and wrestled with Shizui for control. Then, they began investigating Akane's study. Shizui pretended to think deeply before revealing the truth. It wasn't a ghost haunting the house. She had been sneaking in to play around. Relieved that there was no ghost, Akane relaxed significantly. Turned out that after learning about her brother's marriage, Shizui immediately asked their grandfather for a key to the house. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to disturb the sweet honeymoon phase of you newlyweds." Now that the matter was resolved, she demanded compensation. "I hope you'll treat me to dinner as revenge." Having tasted Akane's bento before and found it delicious, Shizui couldn't resist praising her cooking. Despite being tricked, Akane couldn't stay mad after receiving such a compliment. That moment, Saito noticed a grain of rice on Shizui's cheek and instinctively wiped it away. Seeing this, Akane felt a pang of jealousy. Later, Saito played video games with Shizui after dinner. Watching them having fun together, Akane's jealousy only grew stronger. When Shizui insisted on joining Akane in the bath, Akane finally reached her limit. Finally, when it was time for bed, Akane was happy to finally have Saito to herself. She wanted Saito to teach her how to play games, but he hadn't played with her before because he always saw her studying. Eventually, Akane couldn't hold back and brought up Sato's relationship with Shizui. Just then, a small hand unexpectedly touched her. Thinking Saito was teasing her, she turned to scold him, only for Saito to also feel someone tickling him. They started blaming each other, but Shizui quickly interrupted, wanting to sleep with her brother too. Once Saito was asleep, Shizui whispered to him, "You've always been dense. But seeing how close you two are, I feel a little relieved." One day, Akane noticed that Himari and her husband seemed too close. Despite being stubborn, Akane somehow ended up acting as their matchmaker. However, when Himari confessed to Saito and asked him out, Akane started to panic. Before that, Himari had approached Akane and directly asked, "Do you like Saito?" As always, Akane refused to admit it. Himari then revealed her own feelings. "I like Saito. Back when we were preparing for the sports festival, my friend collapsed from heat stroke. Everyone panicked, but Saito stayed calm and handled the situation." Hearing this, Akane suddenly recalled the night Saito carried her to the hospital when she had a high fever. Himari admitted that she liked Saito but lacked confidence, so she was still in the secret crush phase. "Akane, you seem close to Saito. If possible, could you help me get together with him?" Following her friend's request, Akane started observing Sato's daily habits. However, her constant staring made Saito feel uncomfortable. Even during meals, Akane recorded videos on her phone. She gathered information about his preferences and relayed it to Himari at school. Himari was delighted with the details, while Shizui watched the exchange thoughtfully. That night, Saito expected a steak dinner since Akane had been asking about his favorite foods. Although she hadn't planned it at first, seeing Sato's eager anticipation made her want to fulfill his expectations. It was her first time making steak, but she was confident and excited for his feedback. After tasting it, Saito said, "I love every dish you make. It's so good I'd love to eat it every day." Hearing this, Akane became flustered. The next day at school, Himari questioned Saito about his ideal type. "Love isn't just about types. Categories are just a limited way of thinking. If you don't truly understand someone, you can't fall for them," Saito replied. "If it's someone you know well, then you should be able to tell whether you like them or not, right?" That evening, Akane found a notebook labeled "Confidential" on the table. Curious, she reached for it, only for Saito to appear behind her, scaring her. Flustered, she blurted out, "I didn't see anything." Then, in a classic case of guilty conscience, she accused him instead. "You deliberately left that notebook out, knowing I'd sneak into your room, didn't you?" Saito was speechless. To change the subject, he recommended a few books to Akane, which she then passed on to Himari. However, since Himari wasn't great at studying, she struggled to understand them. "I'm sorry," Akane apologized. "It's fine. If I don't understand something, I can just ask Saito," Himari reassured her. Watching Himari excitedly run toward her husband, Akane felt a strange, indescribable emotion. Surprisingly, Saito didn't mind Himari approaching him. He felt indebted to her because, whenever he argued with Akane, Himari would mediate between them. Himari then opened up about her past. "In elementary school, I was bullied. Thanks to Sato's help, I was able to overcome it. Being acknowledged by him makes me really happy." Meanwhile, Shizui noticed Akane's troubled expression. "Are you worried about my relationship with Himari?" Akane, as always, refused to admit it. Through a conversation with Saito, Himari felt really happy. She believed that being able to get close to him was all thanks to Akane. Let's go buy your favorite strawberry cake and then head to your place to chat for a while. Akane also felt good about the idea, until she suddenly realized that if Himari found out she was living with Saito, she'd be doomed. Panicking, she quickly lied, saying her house had flooded. Even though Himari was a bit naive, she still saw through the lie. "Do you not want me to visit your place?" With no way to refuse, Akane quickly hid Sato's belongings and made him stay in the study before Himari arrived. But before he could finish hiding, Himari showed up much faster than expected. Saito told Akane to stall for time while he finished tidying up. However, before he could get everything in order, he suddenly heard Himari's voice inside the house, forcing him to hide behind a cabinet. That moment, Shizui suddenly sent a message, and the phone's ringtone made Himari suspicious. Akane quickly made up an excuse to cover it up. Himari's main reason for visiting was to discuss her feelings for Saito. She had finally gathered the courage to ask him out on a date. Outside the room, Shizui whispered to Akane, "Are you really okay with not stopping them?" Akane hesitated but ultimately replied, "I don't want to betray Himari's trust." Shizui sighed, "I just hope you can be honest with yourself." Later that night, Saito told Akane about Himari's invitation, but she didn't try to stop him. The next morning, just before leaving, Saito asked again, "If you don't want me to go, I won't." But Akane stubbornly replied, "Do whatever you want." However, when Saito actually turned to leave, Akane couldn't hold back and suddenly hugged him from behind. In reality, Saito had already turned down the date. He only mentioned it to see how Akane would react. Seeing her flustered and blushing, he couldn't help but feel happy. Afterward, he invited Akane to go shopping together. The next day at school, Saito was surprised to see Himari approach him again. "I thought I already rejected you. Why are you still here?" Himari confidently replied, "I won't give up. If I get rejected once, I'll just try again." At that moment, Shizui appeared, declaring, "I won't allow my brother to be with just anyone." Meanwhile, Akane noticed something interesting. Saito seemed to have a weakness for straightforward girls. Not wanting to lose to Himari, Akane finally dropped her usual tsundere act and honestly expressed her feelings. To her surprise, it worked like a charm. Afterward, Saito was the one learned about from Akane. Although Saito tried to refuse, he couldn't resist her persistence and had no choice but to accept. Himari enjoyed the process of feeding Saito, but Akane, watching from the side, was burning with frustration. Seizing the opportunity, Shizui casually stole the bento and ate it herself. After lunch, Himari asked Saito for help with her studies. Saito didn't mind, but Himari took the chance to invite him to her house. Hearing this, Akane could no longer stay silent. She quickly interrupted, "You and Saito alone? That's too dangerous. He'll definitely take advantage of you." In response, Himari invited Akane to come along too. Just then, Shizui appeared and Himari, completely unfazed, suggested comfortable, while Akane's jealousy was about to explode. To change the mood, they started playing card games. Akane was fired up, determined to win against Himari. However, Saito effortlessly won every round. When Himari suggested another match, Saito lost interest and excused himself, saying he'd go buy some snacks. Noticing something was off with his mood, Akane followed him. Saito's family was known for having unique abilities. Shizui had extraordinary mental calculation skills, while Saito had an exceptional memory. As a child, his ability to recall even the smallest personal details made people uneasy. He must have been bewitched by Himari's beauty. "That's why you made such a careless mistake," she then grumbled. "You always help Himari study, but you've never taught me anything." Saito sighed. "I wanted to teach you before, but you always refused." Before Akane could respond, the lights in the house suddenly went out. Terrified, Akane instinctively jumped into Saito's arms. The next day, Saito realized that the power outage had only affected his house. He quickly figured out that it was Shizui's doing. Honest was too powerful. Saito felt his heart skip a beat. That evening, as promised, Saito began tutoring Akane. She insisted on pulling an all-nighter to study. Curious, Saito asked, "Why are you so determined to study? Why do you want to become a doctor so badly?" Akane then opened up about her past. She had once witnessed her sick older sister suffer without treatment due to their family's poverty. From that moment, she vowed to become a doctor. The next day, Saito invited Akane to go out together over the weekend. Akane eagerly accepted the date and later sought advice from her grandmother on what to do. Hearing that Akane was going on a date, her grandmother was so touched that she teared up. She then led Akane to a dressing room specially prepared for her and carefully picked. Had ever seen Akane dressed like that. A store clerk even mistook him for someone with ulterior motives. Their first stop was a karaoke lounge. Akane instinctively thought that couples kissed in such places, as Himari had once told her that dating couples always kissed when they went to karaoke together. Two of them browsed for songs and ended up picking the same one, a song they both loved. They then started singing a duet. After leaving the karaoke lounge, they took a break. His mental state was a bit questionable, but he was thoroughly enjoying himself. Noticing this, Saito said, "If you want it, why not buy it?" Akane shook her head. "No way, it's too expensive. I'll wait until I'm an adult and earn my own money." After a